Hi everybody and welcome to the video and live streaming show. My name's John Lacey and I'm joined as always by Sam Proof. Today on the show we're going to be talking all about StreamYard, which is a great option for starting to go live, running a live show, running a video podcast, all of the things. So we're going to be talking about that today. If you've got questions, let us know in the chat, but also, because I'm forever trying to make this thing happen, let us know if you're watching live or if you're watching the replay later on with these hashtags, hashtag Team Live and hashtag Team Replay. Sam, how are you going? How's your week been?
Good. I don't know. No, it's been good. Actually, it was a really weird week. My daughter had her first multi-day away from home event. Like her whole grade went to Catalina Island for this science camp for 3 days and 2 nights. So yeah, for 2 nights, dinner was like, it's real quiet around here because she is just a chatterbox. But she's back. Everyone's good. Everyone's happy. And yeah, it's going pretty good. How's everything with you?
Yeah, everything's going pretty well with me. Again, I don't even know why I ask you about your week or you ask me about my week because it's just the constant blur of everything. Life is always very busy, but we try and do what we can. So let's just check in with the chat. Hello to Saeed, who's watching from Germany over on YouTube as the facilitator. So I guess on today's show, we want to talk about StreamYard, which is a and Saeed saying 37th time is a charm. So finally, Team Live. Yes. Okay. Cool. All right. Today we want to talk all about StreamYard, which is a great piece of software that we've been using to run this show and do some other things with for, I want to say, at least 6 months. We did start on a different tool, but we have been using this one, and I think we really like it, and I think it's a really good option for beginners. And I think during the week, I sort of wrote about this in the Learn live streaming newsletter. In some ways, we're really blessed to have a lot of really good tools at the moment, but in some ways, we're almost too blessed because we have too many options and too many choices, and that can be really overwhelming. So generally speaking, I recommend for beginners either StreamYard or Restream, and usually the studio component of Restream. But let's talk about it. So Sam, let's get into it. So there we do have Puddles the duck, which you know is just such a nice little feature that we can have animated backgrounds on the software. But yes, let's talk about StreamYard. So what is StreamYard and who is it really for, do you think, Sam?
Yeah, so StreamYard is a browser-based software that lets you broadcast and it lets you multicast. And I think really their sort of core mission was, easeability, like simplifying the streaming process and production quality. I think those are 2 of their tenets. I think they have a 3rd tenet, but I don't recall it offhand. I'm not a salesman for them, and we should put that out there. This is just all our opinion. But really, I think it's a really great tool for anyone who is looking to get into streaming and just kind of wants to get into it as fast as possible without having to learn too much. OBS can have a pretty steep learning curve and time commitment to it, and StreamYard simplifies all of that stuff. There is potentially a cost associated with it. So I think anyone who's already kind of established as a business or a creator or a podcaster, this is a little bit more for them than someone who's like, I want to go game on Twitch. It's really not for the gamers. It is more for people almost doing basically what we're doing, stuff like this, not necessarily just podcasts. I think there are plenty of other use cases for webinars or churches or, as I said, podcasts and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I think in some ways, you and I, we're famously really nerdy control freaks. So we love the OBS stuff, but we know the OBS stuff is not for everybody. And especially if it is just a small part of your business marketing, you really want some tools that are pretty straightforward, that you can just have a person on camera or a couple of people on camera, and you can facilitate that conversation really easily. You can interact with the chat. Maybe you can add some branding elements. I think one of the, and again, I don't know that I could be quizzed on them off the top of my head either, but I'm pretty sure the other thing that they're always talking about is ease of use. And StreamYard actually do this weekly town hall, which I think happens sort of Sunday US time and Monday Australian time. And, I think the thing that's really interesting to me is that, and I think it's true of any tool really, like there is a trade-off between ease of use and functionality and
Yes,
complexity. So
for
if
sure.
you're a control freak, you do have to embrace some constraints, although I will say that they do have sort of layout options which give you more control than even Restream does presently. So I guess the other thing to mention too is that both StreamYard and Restream, they both have free options, so you can try them out and get a sense of what they can do. But let's just have a look at the plans that are available for StreamYard. So we've got the free version. Essentially, there will be some branding and some limits on there as well. You can have, I think you can have maybe 2 destinations from memory. I don't know off the top of my head, but again, you can upgrade to the basic for $25 a month, and I'm assuming all these prices are US. And there's also the professional version for $49 a month. Was there anything that you wanted to say about those plans, or how people might want to think about, which one to actually spring for?
Yeah, I think, if you're just getting started, obviously try the free plan just to, even see if it's doing what you want. But when you look to those bigger plans, I think the 2 questions you really have to ask yourself are, like, are you doing interviews, and how many people do you want to be interviewing at one time? Do you want to, I guess 3 questions. Do you want to be, publicly streaming, or be doing like a private webinar kind of thing? And then finally, if you are publicly streaming, do you want to multicast? And those will, you know, uh, all sort of grow to bigger answers of like, yes, I want to do this, and I want this many people to be able to see me. Then the price point goes up to whatever the next level is. So yeah, I think those are the
Sure.
big considerations.
And I think you kind of just alluded to something that we should probably unpack a little bit more, and that's you can record locally. So you don't have to necessarily go live. You can just record
Yes.
in there locally, and then you can edit and repurpose that however you like. You can go live, and again, I think in some ways, probably plan wise, price wise, the thing you want to think about is how many destinations do you want to go out to, because I think
Yeah.
that will be the main constraint, and I think that's kind of true of most streaming software options out there. But thirdly, the thing that Sam also alluded to that we actually have access to, but we've never actually tried, is their on-air webinar
Mhm.
platform. So essentially, you can set it up so only certain people can attend. You can sort of host it on your own personal website. You can include the recording there forever, depending on the limits of your plan and that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
there are a number of different things, and again, it all comes back to your goals. And funnily enough, next week's show, we'll be talking about podcasts and
Yeah.
live shows and some of those considerations, whether you go live, whether you pre-record, and that kind of thing. So please join us for that as well.
Yeah.
I
And
know you've got a video that. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
before you set that up, I just want to say that there's an interesting thing that they just released. I'm not fully sure if it's even completely public yet, but for those who do webinars, they have this feature that is basically the same as inviting guests, but it's like more open. Like, as far as I can tell, it's the same functionality, but kind of triggered differently. Whereas when you're doing a stream like this, we get like an invite link. We send that link via email or messenger to whoever we want on. So we don't want them sharing that link. It's a private link. And then we can put them on the studio and stuff like that. With webinars, they have a similar functionality, but since it's not broadcasting, you're not streaming, you're doing it sort of local to StreamYard. It just shows up in chat as like a thing that the viewers or participants in the webinar can like essentially raise their hand to be like, I have a question, and then you put them on the screen and they ask their question and then they go away, which is, I think, a great functionality that they finally just released. And I understand why that doesn't exist quite yet for what we're doing with like the public streams, because that chat thing wouldn't happen. It's essentially a pinned message, and the API to pull that off doesn't really exist. But super cool if you do webinars.
Absolutely. So, I guess some of the other things that we want to allude to is the fact that you can create events. So you can schedule
Yeah.
these things. You can go out to multiple destinations depending on your plan. You essentially can wrangle the comments, assuming that the platforms you're going out to support that functionality. Not all of them do, and sometimes if you are streaming to an obscure or relatively new place, you might need to do that as a custom stream as well. But let's check out this video because I think it's a really good place to get started in terms of actually scheduling a live event.
Log into StreamYard.com and click Create. Then choose Livestream. Select your destinations from the list. Give your live stream a title. Click Customize for each destination. Click Create Broadcast. Enable and check your mic and camera. Click Enter Studio, and you're in. From here, you can put yourself on broadcast, adjust your on-screen banners, upload a custom logo, and I can even screen record right from the studio. Once I'm ready to stream, all I have to do is click Go Live at the top of the screen, and just like that, I've got a studio quality production with an easy-to-use interface that'll help me connect with my audience on multiple platforms. Those are just the basics to get you started, but let's dive a little deeper and take a look at some of the other features StreamYard has to offer. For starters, we're going to invite a guest into our stream. So at the bottom, you'll see this little invite chiclet. Grab your code, copy your link, and this does give you the option, if you're on the Pro or other plans that you've paid for, to allow your guests to add their streaming destinations as well if you toggle that on. So we've copied our link. I'm going to do this through an incognito window so you can see what they see. So it loads the StreamYard studio. They're given the prompt for mic and camera access, so they will have to allow into that. And we are going to switch over to this, which looks like a person, but this is stock footage. Thank you to Pexels. They can add their name here and enter studio. And on their side, they can see comments and private chat, but that's about it. They don't get any of the other navbar stuff. They can turn on and off their camera and sound, but they can't even put themselves in the scene. They do see you if you are on already. So if we go back to our studio dashboard, close that out, I can find my new guest and add them to the scene. StreamYard will immediately default to a scene that accommodates for the amount of people we have, but you do have multiple options at the bottom under the video player. Our setup has been adjusted already, so the default StreamYard experience, you'll actually see more like 7 of these that include media as well as cameras.
Okay, that's a nice little intro. And hello to CG who's joining us in the chat as well. Great to have your company today. Today we're talking all about StreamYard as an option to get started with live streaming relatively easily and quickly. And that was just a great walkthrough from Sam in terms of, you know, starting, scheduling, going into the studio and sort of inviting that guest. And I think for a lot of people, that's kind of 90% of what they need. And
Yeah.
we'll certainly unpack some of the other features that we've got available to us in terms of the studio in a second. But I guess just one other thing I just want to mention is that it is also possible, and again, everything sort of depends on your plan a little bit, but it is possible to actually schedule a pre-recorded video as a live. And the only thing I would say about that is just make sure your audience knows it's not live, because the worst experience they can have is that they're madly commenting to you and you just completely ignore them. So just I often like to actually put the replay in the title somewhere just to let people know.
Yeah, definitely a good call. Even adding a pinned message is good too. This is a great question by Saeed. Throw this up. Do guests only see the host or live output? So yeah, what the guest will actually see is you get this giant window, which is the live output, and below it you have little windows for everyone who is joined the broadcast. Even if they're not in the live output, there'll be a little box, and it'll be grayed out if they're not on screen, but you will still be able to see like the silent person doing whatever they're doing if their camera is on.
Absolutely. And I must admit, and I have a feeling this is probably very true in Saeed's world of facilitation, but a lot of people can't stand seeing themselves on camera. And I know in Zoom and other programs, there are ways of actually sort of hiding yourself, but I really think on some level, that's one of those things that we really just need to practice and get more comfortable with because it's quite useful feedback.
That's when you
But
just put one of
essentially,
these on your screen, right?
yeah.
Just right on top of, it's smaller than a
I mean,
post-it note. You can hide it.
you could probably turn everything off, or obscure something on your screen. But yes, essentially, like they will see the show as it's happening, and I think that's quite
Yeah.
useful too because, if you bring them in for a particular segment, they'll have a sense of what's happened before them, and they might even, throw back to something you mentioned earlier, or mention something that was a chat comment that was featured. So we're going to come back and talk about more aspects of the studio itself in just a second, but this is the video and live streaming show.
We are constantly training our cats every interaction that we have with them. So when Johan would get on my counter before, this is 10 years ago, before I was the cat expert that I am now, Johan would jump on the counter. What was the first thing I did? I'd say his name, Johan. He loves that. That's a reward for him. He said, you just said my name. I would go over to him and I'd talk to him and be like, you can't be on the counter. Johan loves when I talk to him. Ding, that's another reward for Johan. I'd pick him up and put him on the ground, but I didn't want him to think I was mad at him. So when I'd pick him up very nicely and kiss him on the head and say, I love you, but you can't be here. I'd put him on the ground. I had just done 3 things that rewarded him for being on the counter. So I was encouraging him to continue doing that.
And that's a segment from Sam's podcast, Just Kidding Around, which you can learn more about over at cuteavalanche.com. And this is the video and live streaming show. Today we're talking all about using StreamYard and sort of getting started with that as a streaming option, which can be quite useful as well. Okay, cool. Let's get back into it. So once you've scheduled your event, whether you're going to do that live or whether it's a recorded situation, you'll actually have a button to click which just says Enter Studio. And the studio is where the magic happens. So within the studio, there are a lot of different options, and some of these things are hidden away in different places, and we'll try to unpack some of that today. But if you do have specific questions, let us know in the chat. But certainly we have the ability to interact with the comments and to feature those on screen. We've got the ability to add banners. So, this cuteavalanche.com, for example, that we had a moment ago, that's just some text in a tab within the studio. We also have in fact, I'll come back to the brand tab in a second, but we have the private chat, which is a really good way of Sam and I communicating with each other during the show, and especially when those promos are playing. And I've got a question I'm totally going to ask him about in the chat in a second. And potentially you also have the recording tab. So you do need to actually turn that on. And if you want to record, and essentially the show itself will be recorded no matter what you do, whether you're recording locally or going live. But if you want to also get sort of individual recordings, you do need to go into the settings and actually turn those on. Yep. So they have local recordings, and those are the things that are happening on your individual computer of your individual webcam. And then they also have cloud recordings as sort of a backup as well. So it's a really good idea to turn those on, and we'll talk about that more probably in our repurposing segment. But it's just really useful to have a backup, and in fact many backups, as we sort of established a few weeks ago, but let's not revisit that trauma. But I feel like I've been talking for a long time, Sam, so if there's anything you wanted to add before we get stuck into the brand tab.
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of to piggyback on Saeed's question about what guests see, they also do see like all the chat comments coming in, and the private chat that John just mentioned. They can also full screen the live broadcast if they really don't want to see any of that other stuff. So that is an option that they have as well.
And it's one of those things that I would love, and I was thinking about about this during the week. I would love to, because I've got my teleprompter and my other screens, like I would love to full screen our conversation just on the teleprompter and have the chat and other things on a different screen. But it's not really possible to do that without sort of being signed in a number of different times, and I'm not really sure how that would go. But but let's talk about the brand tab then. So essentially, the brands you have, and someone on StreamYard confirmed this for me a couple of weeks ago, but essentially you have the ability to add 10 brands to a single account. Cool. And you can set up different brands for different shows or different topics. And we're sort of experimenting with that a little bit this week, in the sense that I've set up a new brand for all our StreamYard related content. But we have the ability to specify a brand color, and that's again where, in this case we're using black, and you can sort of see that when I bring out a banner or I feature a comment. So you can see that the black features heavily there. But we also have the ability to pick a different theme. We've got sort of, and these again are really about how the comments and the banners are displayed. We've got the ability to show or hide display names and headlines. I always have them off because I just don't like how they look, but that's up to you. You can potentially add a logo as well. We've got the ability to add overlays. So again, this is just images that you can put on top of things, and it could be a full screen image like we showed the StreamYard plans earlier, or it could be partial as well. And I don't actually have the QR codes uploaded here, but as their own thing, but certainly at the end of the show, I'll get Sam to talk about his website, and that will show some of the screen and we'll have the rest. And that's just a transparent background PNG. So that's really cool. And of course, we even have the ability to use animated GIFs if they're small enough. So there is a file size constraint there as well, but that's really cool. Okay, so we have the ability to add those video clips. And again, you see that in the form of the promos we have on the show, and we've got different backgrounds, and that's where my tabs come in as well. There is background music. I've never used this in my life. I'm curious if you have, Sam.
I believe we've used the StreamYard background music on the Own Every Word NFT game show that I did. And that was like weirdly one of the reasons they ended up not using OBS is that they wanted to use that music for whatever reason, because they didn't want to license other music or something like that. So yeah, I personally don't opt into that, but I have done productions that use it. I've used a similar software that also provided AI created music, and I immediately got a copyright strike from one of those YouTube bots that finds anything that's remotely close, and like I disputed it and I got it cleared, but that's an annoyance I don't need to repeat.
Absolutely. And I will say, and I don't know when exactly this changed, but originally it wasn't possible to upload your own music to this place, but it is now. So if you do have your own royalty-free music, or you've composed something yourself and recorded it, that's certainly something you can use there as well. Okay. Let's get into it. So Said's saying he doesn't like that both cameras are in 16:9. Too much wasted canvas. Can you change the format? You certainly can. Sam has been pushing for this for a really, really long time, and I don't know if it's just because I feel self-conscious, but I am so uncomfortable in filling up this much of the frame. But there are certainly different layouts that come with StreamYard, and you can certainly select those and move between them. But you can also actually create your own layouts, and I feel like Sam's dying to say something. So
no, I'm going to say, because we're going to talk about repurposing later on, and I feel like this layout in particular, this scene, really works well for if you're going to turn things into a short later on, especially if you're only going to need the one person talking at a time. But yeah, I think this looks great. And yeah, I'm not a fan of the wasted space either, Said. But yeah, it comes with about 7 different layouts, including, a full screen and a couple different splits, and then like a media version. So if we're playing a slide or a video, we can be little boxes off to the side.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the other thing too is it is possible to come in and create your own layouts, although there is a certain number at which you are restricted. And that's 10. Kind of on an account basis, not a brand basis. So the other thing, and I felt so clever when I eventually figured out how to do this, because we couldn't figure out how to do this for the longest time, but essentially I set up these layouts to have Sam featured or myself featured. And the trick about this is when you go in and actually set this up, is both of our cameras are on the layout. Like they're both part of the layout, but one is on top of the other. And that was the only way for us to do that, because what we wanted ideally was like if Sam had to run out and look after one of his kids for a second, that I just filled the space. And that can be a little bit glitchy. So, I mean, I think it's probably worthwhile unpacking this. And again, I know this is a beginner show, so I don't want to overwhelm you with too many options, but certainly what I kind of recommend is if you go into the settings, there is actually a layout section, and you will have the default layouts there by default. Once you've decided which ones you're actually going to use and which ones you don't want to use, you can go in there and actually deselect the ones you don't want to use. So they won't be there. They won't automatically default to something weird when you add an extra scene or source or whatever. So that's a great question. This is another great question, and I literally answered this one on the StreamYard. In fact, I think we did it on a show as well. But I answered this on a StreamYard Facebook group. So does it automatically change to the speaking person like in Zoom? It doesn't. So you need to think about how you're using those layouts. The great thing is that you do have the ability to, once you've sorted out your layouts, you can actually assign keyboard shortcuts to different layouts. So if you go into the settings and the hotkeys, you can actually create your own keyboard shortcuts. And again, that's when you can throw them onto a Stream Deck. But it is a manual process. It's not going to sort of switch between them. And in some ways, I know people like that experience, but I'm just worried that if there's just some unintentional sounds that it switches to the person who's not actually speaking, and it always looks a little weird. I have seen it in certain meeting software, and I don't love it, but I mean, there are ways of manually doing it. So we can certainly switch between Sam and I, and I guess, is there anything you want to say about layouts more generally, Sam?
I mean, I was going to say, I would always opt to being in control of that. For, if we're doing like a production or a podcast, even a webinar, I think I would want to be in control of who is big or small. And it's only really in a workplace setting where I want us to have that thing that automatically does it, which I wouldn't be using StreamYard to do, probably. And yeah, as for the layouts themselves, I think it maxes out at 10. And as John said, that is across all of your brands. So you choose wisely those 10 or make all your productions the same, just tweaks on the same theme kind of thing. One thing I did want to point out, which is this is the one place where I'm like overwhelmingly using something like StreamYard is better than using something like OBS, is when things go wrong and your software crashes, your stream is actually going to still be active for at least a certain amount of time. If you can get get the program back up due to the nature of it being through the cloud and the browser and all of that. Within 10 minutes, if you're back up, you're back into that same stream. If you're on something like YouTube that creates new URLs or Facebook that creates a new, streaming URL, you don't have to worry about that. So you go back into the same experience and you haven't lost those viewers because you crashed.
Absolutely. I guess one other thing I just want to mention, in part because you mentioned YouTube Shorts, is that you can actually go into the settings and choose, I think it's in the general settings, you do have an orientation which you can choose landscape or portrait. Yep. You can only pick one of those though, so you can't go portrait in some places and landscape in others. And you do to some extent need to redesign your elements. So if you've got backgrounds and overlays and things, you will need to think about how they're going to work in a different orientation. Hopefully at some point in the future they're going to sort of give you an option to do a little bit of both, but I believe
that'd be nice.
When you are going vertically, like the comments and banners sort of appear at the top of the screen, I guess in part because a lot of the software has sort of information down the bottom that would obscure that. So
right.
Again, you do have a number of different options in terms of doing that. So I don't know, like Sam, was there anything else? I guess we'll talk more about the individual features at the bottom of the screen in the next segment in terms of running a show with StreamYard. But was there anything else that you wanted to add before we go to the next segment?
I mean, I think we kind of touched on, you do have the, in addition to cameras and the other elements that we sort of talked about, like putting comments and banners and all of that, you also have the ability to add an extra camera from the same computer and share a screen and present that as well. Or even like a PowerPoint or other sort of presentation can be uploaded as its own thing. I think that was the only thing that we didn't really say up front. But I think that's it. Onward to the next tab.
Absolutely. So we're going to come back and talk about running a show and repurposing.
Hi, I'm John Lacey. And in Build a Presentation Muscle, I want to talk about finding your voice, refining and sharing your message, using tools and technology to share that message, and looking after yourself as a creator.
And that's a promo for Build a Presentation Muscle, which is my podcast, which you can learn more about over at johnlacey.com or check out on the Learn Livestreaming YouTube channel. So today we're talking all about using StreamYard, especially as a beginner, to stream, to run a show, to maybe record a podcast, that kind of thing. And we both love this software, and we've been using it for this show and potentially other things as well for at least 6 months. Again, I say that as someone who has no sense of time whatsoever. Every day is Blur's Day in my world, but it is what it is. But certainly, I guess just on the back of the last thing Sam said was that you do have the ability to sort of share your screen and add those slides and have the background images and the overlays as well and video. So you can sort of assemble a show with a number of different components. And I think that's really worthwhile, especially if you're doing a live show, because as much as we want you to check out our other projects, and that's why we're promoting them, it's also a great opportunity just to catch your breath.
Yes.
You don't really want to be talking for a whole hour solid, although sometimes I feel like poor Sam can't get a word in edgewise, but you know, we do what we can, but certainly that's something to consider. So I guess, like, Sam, I know that you and I, like, we're very kindred spirits and we're good friends, but in some ways we do things very, very differently, because if I'm on camera for more than an hour, like that never works for me. Whereas I know sometimes you'll just be working on something and you'll share your screen and you'll be there for 5 or 6 hours. So
Sure.
I guess how do you approach using StreamYard for those kinds of projects?
I mean, I think there's a sort of caveat that we need to put out there, which is both John and I are actually also using OBS right now. So we use OBS as a virtual camera into StreamYard, which picks it up as if it was just another webcam. And then we use StreamYard itself for the multi-streaming ability and putting comments on screen and those sort of things. And yeah, I think in a scenario where I am planning on multicasting, multi-streaming, that's essentially how I'm going to use it, is like, I'm going to put this out there, and mostly I'm using it to, take the load off of my own CPU and spread the joy to all of the other platforms. And for the most part, I'm going to be running things through OBS itself.
And I guess
no shade on StreamYard.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to unpack there is that, you're potentially lowering the effort on your CPU, but you're also sparing your internet connection a little bit. So
yes, that too.
You're essentially sending one signal out to Restream, and it's doing StreamYard, and it's doing the heavy loading of sharing that to YouTube and Twitch and all the 30 odd places Sam likes to go live on. So that's another good thing. I will say, and especially because I think Saeed is probably still here, if you do live in OBS, we'd probably push you to Restream rather than StreamYard, because Restream, while it does have its own studio experience, it does let you just take your stream out of Ecamm or OBS or other third-party tools and just push that live to multiple destinations and actually wrangle some of the comments as well. So just keep that in mind. But for today, I guess we'll focus on StreamYard.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, with Restream, you can RTMP in from OBS to Restream and never touch the studio, never even be logged into it, and it just does its thing in the background. Whereas with StreamYard, it is very much, you have to have the browser window open and you are actively streaming through that browser application.
Absolutely. So I guess I'm sure we've given you some insight into this in previous shows, but let's talk about running this show, because I think it's a good example. So, the thing that, and we talk about OBS requiring a lot of preparation, but that's not to say that StreamYard doesn't require that as well. So especially this week, I've started with that new brand account. So I've had to go and find all my my resources and sort of re-upload them to this new place. But, that includes things like the video thumbnail that we sort of show at the beginning and the end of the screen. We've got things like an end card graphic for YouTube, which leaves some space for some related videos and the option to subscribe. you know, the like and subscribe, all these things that we sort of use, we've got to make sure they're actually available and uploaded. So it's worthwhile thinking about those ahead of time. And that's true of video clips, and that's true of backgrounds, and potentially even background music if you want to upload your own. So it's worthwhile having that in mind. And I think I kind of want to talk about a show run document, but in full transparency, we don't even have one this week. So it depends on how experienced and comfortable you are about just getting on camera and winging it. I don't really recommend that to most people, and usually not even to myself. It's just been a crazy week and I just didn't have the energy to put it together.
Sure.
But I think it is worthwhile to sort of think about the kinds of things that you want to cover and, you know, how you're going to present those. So are you going to talk about something and then, you know, in the way that we spoke about the plans and show those on screen? Because again, you'll have to take that screenshot and upload it. Do you have a little bit of a video? You know, we showed Sam's walkthrough of StreamYard earlier. So making sure that you've got different things. Again, this background image with the tabs, I just find it really useful in terms of breaking our show up into different segments. Because it helps me focus on the things that I think we need to be talking about in this particular segment, for example. Yeah. So again, it's your show. You can run it however you like. But I think those are some things that you might want to consider.
Yeah, I think the beauty of the tabs is that I tend to, because, you know, John will talk, and then I finally get my chance, and I'm like, I got to say like 20 different things. And I'm like, wait, that's coming up later. I'm going to not say that one thing, but I'll say these other 20.
Yes. And like in a perfect world, like we would get together and plan this stuff out more, but we live in a very busy world and it's very difficult to actually do. So, okay. So this is a great question. I don't really know off the top of my head, but Sayed asks, is the 1080p actually only available in the more pricey plans? I guess I'll put up that image again and we can have a look.
Yeah, I believe it starts in the professional, which is the one that's most popular, the one on the right. Yeah, it says full HD there.
So full HD, yeah, okay.
And I think that's an older screenshot because when I'm looking at it right now, it's $39 a month. But anyway.
Well, I mean, it might be that I'm in a different part of the world as well, because I did take that literally this morning, but I was in an incognito window. So, I mean, anything's possible. But yeah. Okay. So that is interesting. And I must admit, that is a consideration. I guess when we started doing this show, we were in Restream, and their cheapest plan actually goes out to more destinations than StreamYard does, or at least it did back then. I'm not sure, it might be a little bit different. So, yeah, I mean, you do necessarily need to think about all these things. And some destinations, I think, don't even support 1080. So again, that's a consideration as well. I'm pretty sure Garen Belaney told us that, you know, he was so delighted to see our show on YouTube because on LinkedIn, the other platform that I don't want to mention... but it's only 720. So again, if that's important to you, that might be something you need to consider. And Saeed, being the smart cookie he is, yes, it's the difference between paying monthly and paying yearly. So that makes total sense. Hello to Kid Blood 1 as well. Thanks for joining us over on YouTube. Great to have your company today. So I guess, you know, you've got those things. You've got the banners that you might want to think about setting up too. I always forget this is a thing, but we do also have these tickers across the bottom of the screen, and I never use this, but I'm going to try it today just for the hell of it. So if I can click on this one, you can see that we've got this sort of flashing along the screen, and you can just sort of toggle that on and off, and you can have different things there. So if that's relevant, like maybe if you have a very specific call to action, that might be a good way of reminding people that it's there. I generally like to keep my interfaces pretty straightforward and minimalist, but it's certainly an option.
Yeah, I would say, since we were just talking about the plans, one of the sort of cool things about, you know, having a StreamYard is that it, like John said, does allow you to schedule pre-recorded streams, so you can be live and at the same time playing, you know, another, you know, like a pre-recorded to another stream. You could even have several of those going, depending on if you're going to different platforms or if you're going to something like YouTube that allows you to do multiple streams at the same time. So there is that capacity behind it as well. I don't know what that maxes out at. I don't even see that on these price points. But I've definitely done 3. So which seems like enough.
And Yes, I think it is probably enough. And again, like that's kind of a bigger conversation. I think, like
Sure.
how much do you want to split your audience amongst different places and have competing things for them to watch at the same time?
Sure. I think
Well,
for
although I guess they could watch it sort of later anyway. But yeah,
sure, there's that too. I think for someone who's more focused on just like growing a platform that actually lets them do multiple streams at the same time, like a YouTube or a Facebook, um, that could actually be a strategy they implement into trying to get that watch time for the 4,000 watch time hours. But that is a different show.
yeah. And it's interesting because I make sort of videos on demand for Learn OBS Studio stuff. And I upload them and I optimize the title and I add all the stuff to the description and the different segments. But one day I just combine 3 or 4 of them into a pretend live stream. And for reasons I don't even understand, that gets so many more views than any of them individually. And I don't know if it's just that people are looking for longer content or what that is, but certainly there are options to do that. And I think we'll talk about that more in the next segment when we get to repurposing. But certainly that's an option as well. I guess, like, I'm just looking at the settings, see if there's anything we've actually forgotten. But I think, those pretty much are the basics. Again, the thing we say quite often is learn those keyboard shortcuts. The great thing about StreamYard is that you can actually set them, so you can change them. If you don't like what they're defaulted to, you can change them. You can create a Stream Deck button for them as well, but you do need to make sure that browser window focus when you hit those buttons on your Stream Deck. Okay, cool. So this is the Video and Live Streaming Show. We're going to talk about repurposing, which is always a really popular topic on the show. So we're going to come back and do that in just a second.
If you've been watching us for a while or this is your first time and you're thinking, Sam, John, this is great stuff, but I'm wearing a lot of hats already and I don't need to add this to my list of things that I'm doing, but I really want to live stream, I've got you covered. I've been a freelance technical director and stream operator for 20 years, and I can help you either with one-on-one counseling, setups of shows, or even run your whole show for you. Get in touch with me, samproof@gmail.com, or find out more at samproof.tv.
And you can certainly reach out to Sam if you do need some live production assistance on that front as well. Okay, this is the Video and Live Streaming Show. Today we're talking all about using StreamYard as a way of creating video, of live streaming, and right now we're going to sort of turn our attention to repurposing. So the great thing about StreamYard is that you do, and again, some of this will depend on your plan, so just check that before you commit to anything, but you do have the ability to record a number of different things. And certainly, when we do this show, we actually, because we're kind of paranoid and we've had bad experiences with things in the past, we often record to places even outside of the streaming software itself. But we do have the ability to, obviously, the show as a whole is being recorded, but you also have the ability to grab those individual recordings, and they're actually local recordings. So they're not really at the mercy of your internet connection. So as long as your computer doesn't lose power, eventually there will be a recording of that that's relatively stable. Sam, what do you think we should know about these recording options and how we might think about reusing them?
Yeah, so StreamYard itself, in addition to just letting you download the show recording and the ISO recordings, the individual local recordings, will also give you transcripts in both, VTT and TXT. And they also will give you project files for Adobe Premiere and DaVinci Resolve. I don't think there's another one, is there? That's it.
I think there is a third one. I think it's an Apple product, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But keep talking and I'll see
whatever it is. Whatever it is, nobody uses it, which is great. It's a great start. So when you're actually streaming, it's really good to keep this in mind. You can create a marker, and that marker should show up in those editor files. I believe you just have to hit the M key while you're going, and we'll see after the show, because I did it right at the end of that promo. I never remember to do the marker because for the most part, John and I just use the files themselves and not the project files, just the recordings. But those are, that's a really great handy thing to have if you can be present and remember to hit a marker while you're going. I think that would be something you want to hit a Stream Deck key so you're not fuddling around trying to find the M on your bigger keyboard. If you have a more narrow, just like visual cue on your Stream Deck, that's going to make that easier. And that will definitely help you isolate the moments you want to turn into clips or, bookend big segments, like in a show like this. But doing what we do, where we have these sort of very visual tabs, it makes it much easier to scan through, and I'll hit my mic now, to scan through and find those blocks and be like, this is when we're talking about this thing. So great. It's a nice visual cue that we have that we can go with. I also like to try and put on, for when I'm doing like the kitten cam, as many questions from the audience as possible, because that is another visual cue. You can scan through your project, find that, and know that, you've got a thing there. So if you can find that comment and end it with a marker, then you're like 50% of the work is done for you, right?
Absolutely. So I'm just gonna ad lib something, and hopefully it doesn't go badly. But essentially, like this is a previous show that we've done, and if I go into the download settings, hopefully you can see that, Sam, because I can't currently see the show. But there we go. We've got the ability to download. We've got the ability to edit, repurpose. We'll talk about that in a second. But we do also have this ability to export. So if I click on the export options, we actually get projects that are built out for Adobe Premiere Pro, Final Cut Pro, and DaVinci Resolve. I don't really use any of these programs, although now that I've got a new spec'd up computer, I was really keen to try it out on DaVinci Resolve, and I did have a bit of a play last week with this show. I need to learn the software to really be particularly effective. The thing I found about the project was that Sam and I, our individual recordings were really well synced, but the show as a whole, which is its own recording, was a little bit out. So you might need to spend a little bit of time putting that together. But the great thing about this is we also have the ability to download different things. So we can download the show as a whole, which is this one up here. We can download individual videos, so you can get mine, we can get Sam's. There's also a download all. If you've shared your screen during a show, you'll probably also see that in this list as another thing you can download. And we do have this ability to edit and repurpose. It gives you some options here for a horizontal video or shorts and reels. I must admit, as much as I love StreamYard and the people at StreamYard, this is a very basic tool with a lot of constraints, and I probably wouldn't recommend it to many people. They have recently built in the ability to actually add captions, but unfortunately, if the automated captions are wrong, there's actually no way of correcting them on this tool at the moment. So, just keep that in mind. So in a lot of ways, I'd probably encourage most people to download those files, edit them in whatever you want to edit them in, whatever you're most comfortable in, and then export it that way. But certainly, between at least those 3 recordings that we will have for our show, it gives us a lot of options. So we can bring that in. I sometimes, and again, a lot of this depends on how much free time I have in a given week, might make some short clips from the show. But I guess the other thing, and because I have had so much experience with this, I don't trust anything. So in addition to all these recordings in StreamYard, I also have OBS recordings. I also have in-camera recordings. I have Rode Procaster audio-only recordings that are multi-track. So again, if you spent any kind of time, if you've got the technology, if it's not going to slow down your computer, think about maybe getting some of those things in place. But, maybe more generally, Sam, like if you do have, actually, before I ask you this question, I'm just going to add one other thing while I think of it. Is you mentioned in the last segment that you can reschedule these recordings. Mm-hmm. So, you've got a live show. And the thing that I do is I go live on YouTube and LinkedIn, and sort of 2 or 3 days later, I will play the replay on Twitter or X and Facebook. And basically, the whole thing about that is I say, we had this really amazing show. Sorry you missed it. Go to my YouTube channel, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified, and you'll get the proper experience. So I'm not getting a lot of views on those platforms, but I just want to let people know that this is a thing that we do sort of every week, and to make them aware of that. But I guess, Sam, how do you think we should think about repurposing more generally?
Yeah, I mean, there's, obviously several different methods to repurposing, and each platform might have different, wants and needs. So I think we could spend a whole show just talking about like what to do at that point. But, sit down and create a definitive strategy for like, these are the 2 or 3 platforms I am going to focus on, and, kind of investigate what works on those platforms. So I think when we talk about repurposing, we're talking about either what John was just talking about, which is replaying a live as a pre-recorded live. We're cutting things down to long form for a VOD, or we're turning it into a short. I like when John does the replays, and I have the foresight to jump in and be like, add my platforms. I like to actually be there when it does replay so that I can watch the chat. And if people are there, I can talk to them while they're watching it, which a couple of times I've done it has worked really well. But you can't always be there, which is half the reason you're going to replay things in the first place. So as John already said, definitely make sure that that is noted. After the fact, like when you do a live stream, a lot of us do sort of an intro or an outro and like a countdown. It might be worth it to either go into that original live stream on like a YouTube and trim off the ends, because you can do that on YouTube. Keep in mind, if you do that, you're going to lose any chat comments that were created during the show if you had that save feature on. But it might give that live stream some longevity and search functionality, and I think this is the option that I lean in toward more, that I just don't do as much as I want. You take the whole thing and turn it into its own long form VOD and upload that as a separate video to YouTube. And then you can, make a bunch of shorts from those things. I know a lot of people are using products that John is going to say that he doesn't like, but like Opus Clip or one of those other AI clipping tools. I think Opus does a pretty decent job. I think the other one I played with was Video AI or something like that. It's very similar. They give you a good amount of customized caption abilities, and we'll put all those things out, and you can definitely adjust those captions if they hear something wrong. Put those shorts up and like redirect them back to that long form VOD. So I think that is my proposed strategy that you should steal.
That's actually a really good point. So we lost the ability to add links to YouTube Shorts, but you can specify a related video.
Yeah.
And that I don't know that I get a lot of, like, I don't get found via YouTube Shorts very often. I know occasionally something will get a lot of views, but it is nice that you can sort of take a segment from the show and then have the related video as the entire conversation if people do want to go deeper. But I guess, and again, I'm still grappling with this a little bit because it's been many months since I did it, but it's surprising to me how much demand there is for long compilations on YouTube.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't, I mean, in some ways, Sam is probably the exception because he does sometimes just go live for 5 or 6 hours at a time. But most of us wouldn't do that. But it might be an opportunity to sort of bring a few different things together. And that gives other people different entry points to your content, potentially different things to search for to find it. And I mean, I've received comments on that compilation video as recently as this week, and I'm sure it was sometime last year that I put it up there. And the only reason I did it actually was because Restream had just brought in a functionality to upload a bunch of videos and play them as a playlist. So, I mean, there are all kinds of things you can potentially do. Unfortunately, we're all constrained by time and energy and potentially money as well. So be pragmatic about the things you choose to do and not be distracted by the FOMO. It's funny, Saeed says there is nothing wrong with creating FOMO, and I don't mind creating it in others, but I get really annoyed when marketers do it to me. So that's a bit of a line you have to walk. So just keep that in mind. But I mean, there are all kinds of things you do. And again, I have to acknowledge I'm a control freak. So what I kind of do when I have the time to do it is I will create a new project in Camtasia. I'll bring a vertical version of my participation in this into it, and I will have Sam's horizontal at the top. And then I will just go in and I'll select moments from it. I'll export those. I'll do the captioning, and then I'll upload them. So in some ways, that's a process I know really, really well because I've done it a bunch of times, but it is a little time consuming. and we don't need to get into my AI therapy stuff, but I don't love those tools, and in some ways I kind of think sometimes I should just hire a real person who's a video editor to maybe assist me with that. But you've got to weigh all these things up. But essentially, like, the great thing about those recordings is download them, because no matter what your plan is, you'll have a limit. And unfortunately, if you go beyond that limit, there's a really good chance that StreamYard's going to delete the older ones. And if you haven't downloaded them, you will lose them forever. As individual recordings, at least, you can probably go back and grab it on YouTube or wherever you went live. Right. That's a backup. But certainly, like, I kind of recommend that as part of, if you have a go live checklist, have some after ones. So even if you don't get around to using them, it is very comforting to know that they're there if you wanted to go back to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I feel like we've mentioned a lot of different things today. But that said, if you do have questions about this, or literally any sort of video or live streaming stuff, or content creation more generally, let us know in the chat what you'd like to hear about in the future. On next week's show, we will be talking about podcasting, and it's such a loaded term these days that nobody can agree on. It's really funny. I was talking to some relatives recently, and I'm like, I've got this live video show, and they go, you mean like a podcast? And I'm like, sure, yeah, why not? So, it's one of those things, but we're going to talk about some of the choices that you might need to negotiate. And, someone in our audience, I don't know if I should say who, no, in our audience, not you, Sam. Somebody, no, not me either, said that they might be starting a podcast. So I need to follow up with them and keep them accountable. So, we'll talk about some of the choices you can potentially make: audio versus video, pre-recorded versus live, edited versus uncut, that kind of thing next week. But Sam, where can people find you and learn more about your content and follow you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, you can find me over at samproof.tv. Scan that QR code, and you'll find all of my social links in the top left there. You can pretty much find me as Sam Proof on any platform you want, except TikTok, where I'm official Sam Proof. And we didn't talk about cats at all. So you can head over to cuteavalanche.com to get your fix of cats with our 24/7 cat cam. And next week, this is next week, right? I'm going to be on the StreamYard podcast talking to Rob Greenlee. So look for that. And I will blast that on my socials. And John, where
nice.
Are you at?
So if you want to learn more about me, you can head over to johnlacey.com. I got a whole bunch of articles and tutorials and things. And there are social links at the bottom of all those pages. But yes, Sam, that is very exciting that you'll be hanging out with Rob Greenlee. And if you want to catch up with that, and I should have created a banner for this. In fact, I might do it live. Let's go with it. So youtube.com/@StreamYard.
Yeah.
Go follow that channel, even if you're not using this software, because you'll see Sam later in the next week, I think. I have no sense of time, but just keep an eye on that channel.
Is that right? Is it
subscribe, ring the bell, do all the things, and I'm sure that'll be a great conversation, and we'll certainly try to link out to that on the social media. So have a great weekend and a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you again next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you happen to be watching this. I guess that's another thing we didn't really mention was that while you have a limited number of destinations you can go out on via StreamYard, depending on your plan, we've added all of ours. So, Sam and I, this show goes out to my YouTube channel, Sam's YouTube channel, my LinkedIn, Sam's Twitch, like all over the place. So, you could be watching this practically anywhere.
Yeah, and they actually have the ability, starting at the basic plan, for you to allow your guests to add their destinations as well. So that's an insane amount of things. I once did a stream through StreamYard with the guys over on Speedify, and they were like, here's the thing, you can add your own destinations. And I was like, oh, I already have an account. And I added all of mine, and they were like, we went out to 22 different platforms. We've never gone to that many platforms. So be careful what you wish for, I guess is the moral of the story.
Absolutely. So thank you so much to everybody for your company. We'll be back again next week. Take care, and if you've got questions or comments, let us know, and we'll talk to you again soon.